Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, new life for Governor Hogan's toll road plan. Why has Will Jawando proposed an extension of pandemic rent moratorium? What impact will Tom Hucker's entry into the race for county executive have? And redistricting hits fever pitch. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the Dean of Democratic Politics, Sam Statland, and Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. It appears that Governor Hogan's push to expand the Beltway and I-270 is gaining new support among the public and some local officials, as evidenced by yesterday's vote by the National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board to include the project in an air quality analysis decision that it reversed only a month ago. Mark, proponents for Governor Hogan's plan point out that Maryland, particularly Montgomery County, is lagging behind in infrastructure development and job development compared to Virginia. What do you think?
Well, I agree, and it's an observation for anyone using access to Google. I spent a lot of time on the other side of the river on transportation issues, so it's no secret. And I'm struck when I deal with Democrats on the other side, Virginia Democrats, how much they have embraced a sort of use all methods approach to transportation. So it includes various tax increases, but also toll increases on the Dulles tollway, also hot lanes. They want transportation to move forward. Sometimes it's been the Republicans in Virginia who fought taxes and pushed back on that. And that's a 180 degrees difference from the way some Democrats in Montgomery County have been responding to Governor Hogan's proposal. I think that difference has led to that partisan or that political dynamic has led to Virginia moving ahead much more effectively on transportation issues.
Sam, this decision to include the study in the air quality report isn't the end of it, is it? It's just kind of the first step.
Well, Casey, I think we're going to get support on that. And I think that what has been proposed is a blend of what people wanted. Most importantly, it supports the citizens who live along the Beltway from the 270 cut over towards Prince George's County. These are the guys that had the most vocal objection to widening the Beltway and also the toll roads. Also within the county, of course, we wanted more money going into the transit ways so that we could have better bus transportation and public transportation throughout the county, which should make the business community happy because most businesses want local public transportation to make it easier for their employees to get there. And the reluctance was really within the governor's office. So after much hassling back and forth, this compromise was brought, which resulted in the new vote. So I think that this is going to go through, and I think it benefits everyone. And I think it moves us more to be more competitive, commercially within the business community to increase jobs, get better jobs within the county, and grow more so than we have in the past, which makes Mark's point. I think we really need this tremendously. Now, whether this battle will end, no, this battle's not going to end. Because once this project gets done, and God knows how many years it'll take, probably 5 or so, then we'll start, the battle to extend the toll roads through the rest of Montgomery County and into Prince George's.
Could I push back a little bit on the language there, because we're really not talking toll roads in the sense that everybody who is passing along the highway has to pay the toll. We're talking about what are effectively voluntary tolls, these hot lanes, where for those who choose to have more, to move more quickly, they can voluntarily do it. Obviously, there's a model that exists in Virginia. And I think that there's been a lot of misinformation, some of it because of this, calling it a toll road. It's not a toll road. It's basically a hot lane like they have on the Beltway in Virginia.
Mark, I agree with you, but the point is that whatever is done along the Beltway from the 270 cut through Prince George's County is going to require an expansion of the Beltway. You can't put in additional lanes within the current roadway. It's just not wide enough.
Well, but Sam, doesn't that really speak about the long range planning for this region, and that we need a third crossing of the Potomac River, further into the county, because we desperately need an outer beltway to our inner beltway.
I personally, and I'll commit heresy if you won't, think that we should have a third beltway. I think that we should take 370 and extend it into Virginia. It's going to go through.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Wait.
So Sam,
Ag Reserve. It goes through part of the Ag Reserve, a lower corner of it. But if we make it a limited access from the river to 270, I don't think people should complain about it. And I do think in the long term, that's the solution. Now, whether
Sam, you are going to be excommunicated, I'm afraid. Because I agree with you. And you know what happens to people that I agree with? They disappear in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I understand.
So I was asked earlier this week at a breakfast by a very prominent person in transportation in Virginia, why won't you guys embrace a third crossing? And I will tell you, my comment was, look, let's just focus on the American Legion Bridge. We got our hands full as it is before we deal with that particular.
Well, Mark, you may be right, and you're going to have the last word. But I've been pushing for a third crossing for 20 years, and I still think it's necessary. But let's go on to our next topic, because this is something near, that's occurring here in Montgomery County immediately. No segment of the economy was more affected by the coronavirus restrictions than the rental housing industry. And as governments reacted to control the pandemic, and they enforced many restrictions on landlords. Sam, during the pandemic, even a rabid pro-business guy like me felt that there should be governmental sponsored relief to those that needed assistance as a result of the coronavirus. Because let's face it, for most people, if they can't work, they can't pay their rent. So during the pandemic, I thought all kind of assistance should be there, and I think there's lots of programs that have been projected. One issue that just came up is last week, Councilmember Will Jawando introduced a bill to extend the pandemic era limits on rent increases for a year. I'm not sure that is necessary. The state of the emergency was lifted on July 1st. What do you think?
Casey, in the big picture of things, the governor wanted to suspend additional payments to families to subsidize loss of income, workman's comp. And he was going to do that, but there was such a hue and cry from the voters as well as from elected politicians that got pushed back. So Will Jawando's concern is that, yes, we lifted restrictions July 1, making it easier for people back to work, but there certainly is a lag time. You have a lag time. Just because things are lifted doesn't mean that a business is ready to operate. I know of several businesses that are still dealing with the situation of not opening their offices, not bringing people in, and keeping a limited work staff on doing business virtually. The restaurants are all having problems hiring people. And the people who are not qualified for some of these jobs need to be retrained. So I think it's reasonable, very reasonable, to extend these benefits at least throughout the end of the year, which I think his plan does.
Well, what Jawando has done is extended for an additional 270 days, because the law that was passed last year in April of 2020 extended the moratorium, and we're only talking about rent increases to, we're not talking about suspending the payment of rent, we're talking about increases for 90, was extended for 90 days. So they would have until the end of September before a landlord could raise his rent. I'm not sure the rationale. I mean, I understand we have housing programs in place to help people that can't pay. I'm not sure how a moratorium or a rent freeze is helping tenants. But I want to go to Mark on this.
Sure. Casey, I mean, I would.
Understanding that landlord can still increase his rates up to the consumer index rent component of it, which is 1.2% with Jawando's ban. Is that wrong?
No,
Well,
that's not wrong. We have a voluntary moratorium or a structure, let me say, saying that suggests what the increases a landlord could enact, but they're not held. They can raise their rents over them, and they have to be able to justify them. Mark, go ahead.
Sure. Let me observe that the Biden era inflation rate is a good deal higher than that. But more to the point, what you're describing are benefits, or that go beyond the people who are immediately affected by the pandemic. It's sort of a blunt instrument. But here's I've heard a lot of hand-wringing about the lack of affordable housing or the creation of housing in Montgomery County. The surest way to bring a grinding halt to the construction of new rental housing is to have these kinds of price controls put in place, because people decide, I'm not investing in Montgomery County, I'm not building that apartment building, or I'm not expanding that building in Montgomery County, I'm going to do it somewhere else. There's not a single jurisdiction that you can point to anywhere that when rent controls like that, and we kind of fuzz around the edges about what this is, has resulted in more housing construction. It's brought it to a grinding halt, and that's exactly what we don't need.
Well, I think again, I'm all in favor of helping people who have lost their jobs because of the pandemic. But as you point out, Mark, I think this is broader than that. And I just wonder about the necessity of it. I also wonder whether or not the county has the power to do that, because the bill they passed last April was under the emergency powers granted to them by the governor. And I'm not sure this new moratorium for a year may qualify. But when we come back from this short break, Councilmember Tom Hucker announces for county executive. Why? Because Mark Elrich isn't woke enough. Stay tuned. Welcome back. With a slogan that reads, "It is not enough for the county executive to be a progressive. We need a progressive that can and is committed to actually delivering progressive results." With that slogan in hand, Councilmember Tom Hucker became the third Democrat to announce plans to challenge current county executive Mark Elrich in the 2022 election, along with businessman David Blair and fellow council member Hans Riemer. Sam, in a hotly contested election with a plethora of candidates in 2018, Mr. Elrich barely won the nomination. There are those that suggest that Mr. Elrich has not been able to expand his base and is vulnerable on this election from his left.
That's a very interesting comment. I'm going to give you two experiences. I happened to, over the past 2 years, was out with Mark twice in public at the Silver Diner about a month ago. And after we happened to duck into the restroom. And as we were coming out, a gentleman stopped Mark and said, "Mark, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you keeping me and my family and my friends and my neighbors safe because of the COVID. I think you've done a marvelous job." And Mark turned to me and says, "These are people coming up to me in a random way and saying things like that. And I've heard the same thing before. And just because of that, I think Mark has expanded his base. And I think it's going to be easier for Mark to win re-election on top of what he has done for the business community. I think he's done an awful lot for the business community, and he'll glean votes from there too. So I think the addition of Hans Riemer and Tom Hucker, who I like both of them and have supported them in the past, will dent more into other bases than it will Mark's. And I think Mark's base has expanded, and I think he's going to easily win re-election.
Well, I want to go to Mark on this, because Elrich, Mr. Elrich, Mr. Hucker, and Mr. Reamer all play in the same Silver Spring Tacoma Park sandbox, as Sam Statland mentioned. But and I think there's a suggestion that they will cannibalize the progressive vote, opening the door for David Blair, businessman David Blair, who only lost by 77 votes in the last election, to sneak through and win the election.
Well, that's the $64,000 question: is do they cannibalize the progressive vote, the woke vote, or do they simply cannibalize the vote of somebody other than Mark Elrich? With all due respect to Sam, Mark Elrich is a very polarizing figure in this county. There are lots of people who don't share the choices he made in COVID and frankly have more confidence than what was done elsewhere. And so that's really the question: is which vote, which is the vote that ends up cannibalizing by having this enlarged field?
Well, but we got to remember we're playing in the Democratic primary here.
Yes.
And so the people that don't like Mr. Elrich may not be voters.
Right.
They may be part of the independents or the 2 or 3 Republicans that are able to vote each year in Montgomery County. So,
listen, Tom plays in a single district. Hans Reamer is at large. So in this type of a race, and it's a Democratic primary race, who has the most strength? Always the incumbent has a huge advantage. The second person to me who has an advantage is a person who gets exposure countywide, and the person with the least advantage, of course, is the person running in a single district. And we also have to remember that there are not, at this point in time, no woman has entered this race. And I'd be shocked if there's not a woman who enters this race within the next 30 days or so. So I think it'll further drain things down. And that's why I really think Mark is going to win. And I want to, with all respect, Mark, when it came to COVID and safety, Montgomery County, over 300,000 people jurisdiction, leads the nation in safety, inoculations, hospital rates, etc. You can't say that Mark is one of the best in the country on these issues. And
Sam, we know your affinities here, and we have to move on. So thank you very much, because I want to go on to a topic that you are especially knowledgeable about, and which is the Maryland Citizens Redistricting Commission, the one that was sponsored by Governor Hogan, held its first virtual public meeting on July 21st for residents of Montgomery County. And Sam has reported in Maryland Matters today, some Montgomery County residents urged the commission to retain the multi-member districts, arguing that the districts empower historically disenfranchised voters. The real question is, should we keep multi-member districts in the House of Delegates?
I found that article very interesting. And the Montgomery County Redistricting Commission, the County Redistricting Commission, which only deals with the county in-district changes that are going to be made, going from 5 to 7 districts, has conducted about 20 virtual meetings throughout the county. And people are very much confused between federal redistricting and county redistricting. I find it fascinating that people don't get these differences. When we're talking about the commission, what the commission really is looking at is the congressional districts. They're not looking at, and the congressional districts are not the same as the legislative districts that we have. I didn't see any explanation of it. People were talking about, in fact, one person said, I love having a senator and 3 delegates. It gives me more people to talk to on a given issue in Annapolis. And that's well true. But the question is do we need to have 3 people representing Montgomery County in Congress? And currently, the average is about 713,000 citizens per congressman. Montgomery County's population is going to grow to about 1,100,000, give or take. And right now we have 3 congressmen representing that area. So I think what will happen is we will go back to 2 congressional representatives, because in the end, the legislature is going to draw a different map. And their goal is to get rid of Andy Harris in District 1. And the only way they can
Hooker by crook.
and the only way they can do that is by expanding out more Democrats in District 1, which means a reduction of Democrats in the other district. That's what the goal is.
Well,
Our I also feel that gerrymandering is terrible, but when you look at our map, it's absolutely, horrendous. Sarbanes district, it weaves through Baltimore and Howard and Anne Arundel counties and gets to Montgomery. So
Jamie Raskins goes all the way up to the Pennsylvania border, doesn't it? I mean, it goes well into Carroll County.
Yes, it does.
Well, yes, it does. Part of it does. That's the part. That's what I'm saying to you. That shift is stop.
I mean, I don't think Jamie Raskin, represents the people of Potomac, let alone the people of Carroll County. But Mark, I want to let you weigh in on this, because in that same article in Maryland Matters, they were talking about the fact that single districts, and I'm only talking about the General Assembly here, and I'm not talking about the congressional races, the single districts would allow people new entrants into the marketplace, into the election process, and would provide better representation.
Well, I read that too, and I found it fascinating. Frankly, I think trying to address what is really the fundamental, one of the flaws in the whole district redistricting process in Maryland. There is not a single case that I am aware of. There are multiple cases where under the Voting Rights Act, where efforts to break up discriminatory electoral processes, these multi-candidate districts were broken up. So because it was a tool that was used for sort of majority white areas to prevent African Americans from having a district. And so the Department of Justice came in and broke them up. There's not a single case that went in the other direction. And so this argument that somehow, multi-candidate districts in franchises people is something that nobody else has ever managed to discover. And suddenly Maryland Matters has got this theory. It is a fundamental flaw of Maryland's electoral process that ought to be addressed by moving to single member districts.
Well, I think that we've done a great job in Montgomery County, especially when you look at the diversity within our representation in Annapolis. It's very broad representation. I can't think of, well, maybe I could think of, no, I really can't think of any ethnic group that has been prohibited from running for office that haven't gotten elected to office, including, a pretty good female contingency. So I think it's benefited Montgomery County, and I think it's true throughout most of the other parts of the state. Where you have single districts is where you have no population.
Well, we got to wrap up and go to break. But Sam, in response to your question about the Montgomery County effort at redistricting, the chairman of the Redistricting Commission, Mariana Correa, is going to be on the show next week to talk about her efforts and the efforts that you are engaged in as well on the Montgomery County redistricting from 9 districts to 11. When we come back from this short break, stay tuned for Parting Shots. And now with Parting Shots, Mark Uncapher.
Thank you, Casey. We almost had one of our former panelists move into run for statewide office in Boyd Rutherford, and then of course he decided not to run, and Kelly Schultz decided to run it instead. But the good news is there's now another past regular panelist on 21 this week who is on the cusp of running for statewide office. And in the spirit of teasers, I'll leave it there.
I think I know who it is. So thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Sam Statland.
Well, folks, as you all well know, I'm involved in the Montgomery County redistricting. And our charge is to take the existing 5 districts and expand them to 7. It's really historic because we're going to have to shift populations in a big way. And it's the first time that we've had the redistricting commission that we have. So I encourage you to participate and come to our virtual hearings. We've had 20 of them so far. We will come to your neighborhood and we will present virtually to any groups that you have, whether it's 2 people or 50. So get in contact with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And as I mentioned, we are going to have the chairman of that committee, Mariana Corder, on our show next week. And also next week, can Montgomery County save the planet? When we come back next week, we will discuss the county executive's proposal to set building energy performance standards and how businesses and residents will be impacted. And this is a multi-year plan, folks, so you better hold on to your shower heads, I guess is, if for want of a better analogy. I want to thank the panel for being here. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.